Creation, destruction, survival, unlimited imagination. Choose your fighting style, add your techniques, pick a background, and get ready to begin your journey on the Silk Road. 6 visceral fighting styles, each steeped in real martial arts tradition and gritty flavor. 22 localized backstories, giving each fighter a past worth bleeding for. 89 distinct strikes, kicks, throws, chokes, trips, and takedowns, each a weapon that can win a fight or end a life. Fast, brutal, wit-heavy combat that makes every move feel earned, risky, and unforgettable. And 7 easy-to-follow steps to create your martial arts fighter. And that's the intro to the Fists and Fiends Player's Handbook. Welcome back. I'm Randy Brown, creator of Fists and Fiends, and today I'm going to walk you through a tour of the Player's Handbook. This is a high-quality, hardcover, art-first book. What that means is art is at the forefront, so you as the player have plenty of things that you can just flip through and look at that draw your attention and sink you into the world that you'll be fighting in. Today I'm going to walk you through chapter by chapter and give you an introduction to each, some of my inspirations for the design and layout, as well as why children shouldn't be allowed to have ninja weapons. Let's get started. Let's kick it off with the vibrant and amazing cover art done by Stephen Wu. This is the Mantis Boxer. Stephen was introduced to me through Matt Orr of Wet Ink Games. They make titles such as Never Going Home, kind of a gritty survival horror placed in World War I. Pretty cool games and concepts. I highly recommend you check it out. Stephen's actually a contributor on those books. Matt sent me his name. I was deep in the weeds with trying to get the layout, the structure, and the rules finished up, as well as build out the story campaign. After a quick back and forth, I drew up a frame of the Mantis Boxer, which is basically a glorified stick figure, sent it off to Stephen with what the pose was, gave him a little background on what I wanted to see a Mantis Boxer shadow boxing in 1800s China with a survival horror gritty feel to it. This was his first attempt, and I was highly impressed and never looked back. I thought his art style was a perfect fit for Fists and Fiends. As we roll past the credits and we get into the meat of the book, you can see that there's an introduction to the term boxing and where it comes from and how it translates in Chinese martial arts. On the right side is the table of contents. So let's dig into that for a minute. We have the biography, background, history of the game up first. Then we introduce the players to the Yellow Dragon, the lore. This is a very short exposition to give you just enough information that you can design a character for the right setting. I didn't want to go heavy on the lore personally. That's something that kind of bothers me with RPG books. When I open them up, I don't want to read a novel before I start making a character. It's just a personal preference. So when I created my Player's Handbook, I set a little bit of background to give you enough to work with, and then we dive right into character creation, which is one of the coolest parts of role-playing games. Jumping into that, in chapter 1, we have the 7 stars of character creation, and that's a quick and easy guide to bring you from nothing to a complete fighter that's ready to be unleashed in the world. At the end of that is a Plumflower Festival, which is a tournament that sets you up with a story introducing you to the beginning of the Silk Road campaign, but it's a PvP tournament that you and a friend can do to not only earn a couple of experience points for your character early on, but it'll introduce you to the combat mechanics. Now, this chapter and this book was designed well before the Shadow Box came out. So I didn't have that as a combat trainer before the Player's Handbook. You can still do both, and I do recommend that. The Shadow Box is a solo adventure and really gives you quite a bit more information than this tournament. But this is one that drops you right into the lead up to the campaign. So it's kind of cool, it's fun, and it gives you some more background of the story, but it kind of drops you into it instead of just reading about it. All right, from there we get into XP. Very, very fun stuff. How can you level up your character? I talked about that in another video that we get into the specifics. Earning XP, spending it, lineage, and reputation. Chapter 2 covers rolling the bones. This is where we get into the dice mechanics, how to take a turn, what actions are, the actions themselves and a description of each, and modifiers, etc. How you help others in combat, and what it means to have opposed rolls, critical failures, and how fighting spirit works. As a quick note on actions, this is something that I give to the players that you can kind of study outside of the game, but there's a note in the Game Master's Guide specific to caution GMs about players staring at actions on their turn. It's a personal preference, but when I run Fists and Fiends, I don't give out lists of actions to the players. Don't expect them to memorize them either. It's tell me what you want to do, tell me what you imagine your character's doing in this moment, and then the GM matches that to the action on their side of the screen, making the best fit. It's also, as a game master, we are coaches to the players. So what that means is it's our job to coach players and advise them on actions they may not be aware of. So if they pick something or they think of something, there might be a better choice. Rather than withholding that information, it's good to give them all of the options so they can pick the best way forward. And that way they also learn more about the game as we go. Then we get it to the good stuff. All right, the meat and potatoes. Chapter 3, Way of the Empty Hand. This is everything you need to know about hand-to-hand combat in Fists and Fiends, including how initiative works, attacks, defense, more on fighting spirit, how combat stunts work, those really cool moves that you can unlock in the middle of the fight that can be an absolute game changer. There's the rules on sneak attacks and ambush, as well as damage, how that works in the game, and iron body. After that, we have critical injuries, how this can affect your character going forward in the campaign, and what you're doing to the fiends when you break them. Crit tables are all in the Game Master's Guide, and those get rolled whenever a character's attributes are broken, whether they're an NPC or a PC. Then rounding out this chapter are two components of all combat, which is verbal combat, but this isn't just how to talk your way out of a fight. This is also how to manipulate, coerce people in the game, and more importantly, how to taunt your enemies, which can lead to distracting them, disrupting them, and even stealing actions from them in the middle of combat. Right after verbal combat is what happens when you need to run away, or the enemy runs away and you really have to chase them down. So chase combat's an important part of Fists and Fiends, and these are the rules, but when we're in the middle of a chase, two things will absolutely take the buzz and excitement and the lightning out of the room when you're in the middle of chase combat. That is over complexity of how things work and reading rules. Chase combat is super simple, but as you can see, there's only 2 pages of rules in the entire book on how it works. So everything's condensed, and actually one of those pages is all stunts and mishaps tables of things that actually happen in the middle of the chase. And the last chapter of the book is weapons, how weapons work in Fists and Fiends. Even though you start out the game as a hand-to-hand combat specialist, you are going to come across weapons from time to time on the missions. On these pages are everything you need to know for how weapons work, the different types, their sizes, ranges, etc., and a whole section on ranged combat specifically that includes incendiary weapons. Armor and shields are part of the game. They are a smaller part, By this time in history, during the Qing dynasty, armor was pretty much just used for ceremonial purposes. It was too cumbersome and really didn't offer any protection against ballistics. As I said in the introduction, the player's handbook is art first. So here we see the yellow dragon depicted by Stephen Wu, and an introduction into the game, era setting, the cannon fortress where you start out, and what happened that led to you being isolated for the last 3 years in the fortress. The opening pages of Chapter 1 are the 6 boxer styles depicted. We have the eagle claw, the elemental boxer, the cotton boxer, the monkey boxer, the mantis boxer, and then the elephant boxer. We have a 1-page sheet for new players introducing you to the game, different terminology, and the things that you need to worry about first before you start playing. I am all about play, 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 not read, read, read. So I would rather you just have a base knowledge of what you're getting into. Building your character will actually help you with understanding some of the things that you need to pay attention to while you're playing. So all of it kind of works together as you go, rather than trying to study something that's going to take you hours and hours, or even worse, sitting at a table and having somebody read you rules for 3 hours before you can actually roll dice. Then we get right into the character creation, and we start out by picking your fighting style. Each boxer style is a 2-page spread showing the artwork that was done, as well as the descriptions, challenge levels, their starting techniques, their teacher, typical backgrounds that character's a good fit for, and boxer strategy. Each boxer has its own talent, and each of these is on the character sheet, so you don't have to refer to the book. Now we get into step 2, fighting techniques. Every boxer style has different techniques that they are focused on. So mantis boxer has strikes and kicks, whereas an elephant boxer has throws, trips, and takedowns. Each character starts with 4 techniques, except for the elemental boxer, which starts with 5. However, you're going to roll for the techniques. And this was a design decision that I made early on for a couple reasons. Rolling for the techniques versus picking them gives every character you create a different feel. They can be vastly different from one another in the way they execute their strategies and tactics, regardless of the style being the same or even the same background. A bonus to this is you kind of kill the metagaming, where a player can just pick the techniques that do the most damage and only have those. Let's jump to backgrounds. So there's 22 distinct backgrounds that you can choose from when you build your character. And they're divided up by class, upper, middle, lower, outsiders, and any. Like you could have any class be these types, a missionary and a monk, for example. Now this allows you to quickly develop a story about why your character was there when the floods hit, what they were before they were a martial arts fighter. Every character in the game who is not an upper class character, so if you choose a background that is a lower class, middle class, or an outsider, we roll for literacy. In this time period, a majority of people were still illiterate, something that we take for granted today. So you roll for your character on whether or not they could learn to read and write. This is somewhat important because a game master can add a specific challenge level to your adventuring simply by creating a clue that you would miss if your character can't read. This happens in the Silk Road campaign. There's a particular mission where a clue is dropped, and sometimes there's an entire group of players that their characters can't read, so they miss this clue, which means they miss out on an advantage for later in the campaign. Each of the backgrounds is shown with a description as well as their background talent, what skill they can buff every time they roll. For example, the Bannerman gets a +1 to strength, and each of them has additional abilities that they get with their background talent. Later on down the road, we'll have a deck of playing cards with these backgrounds depicted on each of the cards. So when you're playing, you can simply refer to that rather than have to write all of this information onto your character sheet. Rounding out chapter 1, I'll just make a quick note about resources and vitals. These are the last steps with your character creation. Some characters do have resources they start with. For example, the doctor is going to have a medical bag with acupuncture needles and bandages. An herbalist is going to have herbs. But for the most part, the characters have no resources when you begin the game. Money is irrelevant in the current state of the world, which gives agency in your missions. And sometimes you have to break away from the main campaign and go out on missions just to collect resources that you're short on. At the beginning of chapter 2, we can see the diviner or fortune teller using the yarrow sticks and the yi jing to tell someone's fortune. This is the artwork leading into the chapter on how dice work and actions, etc. Now, there are slow actions and fast actions in the game, and during the tutorial videos I'll get into this more, but you can see that there's only a few slow actions that you choose from, and we don't want analysis paralysis, so we're not sitting there staring at these during the game session. This is available to the game master behind the GM screen so they can quickly look at it and refer to it in the middle of this and keep the pace of the combat moving quickly. Here's the artwork leading into the empty hand combat chapter, Way of the Empty Hand. And in this chapter, you can see we get into the stunts for each of the boxer styles. As a note, all of these are on the back side of each of your character sheets, so you can quickly flip that over and figure out what stunts are available to you when you have extra successes. Stunts add a lot of explosive action to the combat in the middle of the fight. They can be a real game changer. Now, later in the empty hand combat chapter are a couple pages on advanced combat talents. These are things that you can add as you start to level up your character's skills. Each of them has prerequisites that your character is going to need, and these can cost quite a bit of experience points, but they're very powerful and they can add a significant advantage in combat. So rather than always focusing on leveling up, we talked about this in the leveling video, is sometimes you're trying to widen the character's skills and capabilities rather than just shoot for the moon. And this is one of those ways that you're leveling skills, and that kind of creates a more robust character. Each of these narrows the focus of each boxer style. So rather than trying to get all of them, you're looking at one or maybe two of them that can expand on your boxer style's specialties. All right, I thought this would be a cool page to stop on. So there's a few details on here. One, I'd like to point out that verbal combat is a one-page rule set. There isn't a lot to it for the player side. Just some things that you want to keep note of. And then there's this right here, which is a warning to all of you players out there who are on a recon mission and have been warned not to go into a city and return with the information, but choose instead to dive over the wall and go in and face an army of militia. As you can see, the chase combat's pretty straightforward, easy to follow, and then you get into the stunts that happen on whether you're the prey or you're the predator, and chase mishaps as well. Here's the spread for the weapons chapter. A couple things to note early on in the weapons chapter is what happens when characters don't have skills in weapons and they try to use them. Oftentimes, a character has greater advantage when they're not using the weapon than when they actually have the weapon without training. And that leads us to weapon training. So each weapon type has a specific amount of time it takes to learn that weapon. And a character needs to be able to devote that time. Now, that's important because this is, especially in the Silk Road campaign, it takes place in a very condensed time period. So having a player say, well, I'm going to go learn how to use this sword. When? You're doing missions every day trying to gather resources or defend the fortress or assault another group or try to infiltrate something. You're being engaged in this constant fervor that there isn't a lot of downtime, especially in that part of the story. So having the ability to just do whatever you want whenever you want is something that we try to remove with Fists and Fiends, because we really want the world to feel dangerous. We want agency. We want even time to be a resource that you have to manage. There's how to attack and defend with weapons, and then weapon features. So weapons have strength and agility requirements depending on the type of weapon. And then each of them has a feature that describes a special trait that weapon can do. For example, a weapon can be agile, which means it's complex and requires higher dexterity and precision to use. And then you have weapons that are able to hook. This is a feature of some of the Chinese martial arts weapons, like the tiger hook swords. We interrupt this video not for an advertisement, for some product placement, but instead to share with you that when I was growing up, I used to get magazines like this. Now, usually they were like Black Belt or Ninja magazines, and one of the best parts of these magazines was in the back. They were full of ads, hundreds of ads selling Asian martial arts weapons. I was fascinated with these. I would have my marker out and I would be circling these left and right, going through the magazine, making a list of all the weapons that I wanted, taking inventory, and being filled with anticipation and wonder at the fact that you could have these mailed to your doorstep. There was only one problem. I lived with a samurai warlord whose sole purpose in life was to extinguish the flame and the potential of me being the world's youngest ninja assassin. You may have guessed by now, that warlord was my mother, who controlled the purse. So when I would go to her with the magazines presented to her, like the white ape presenting fruit, I was squashed. It was like that movie A Christmas Story with the Red Ryder BB gun. Constantly being told, no, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. Well, that was me with ninja weapons. Until a few years later, I stepped into the underworld. I stepped into the black market, also known as public high school, where I had access to everything and anything I ever wanted. I had shurikens, slingshots, throwing knives, BB guns, even incendiary devices that I could purchase in the hallways of school. Now, in hindsight, there's a good reason why I was always being told, no, I can't have stuff like that, because I almost blew my hands off trying to build a grenade launcher to attach to my BB gun with a bunch of bottle rockets and modeling glue. Turns out, glue's a pretty good accelerant. Now, why did I interrupt this video to tell you that? I've always been fascinated with Asian martial arts weapons before I could even pronounce kusarigama. Something about them was just exotic and thrilling. When I was 13, I was on vacation with my mother and my sister in some small lakeside village in northern New Hampshire. I wandered into a bookstore one day and I came out with 2 books, both Dungeons & Dragons books, but one of them is still one of my favorite books to this day, Oriental Adventures. I absolutely loved that book. So when it came time to do this chapter of the Fists and Fiends rulebook, I invested a lot of energy into it. Now, I haven't seen an Oriental Adventures book since probably early 2000s when I lost my entire D&D collection to a fire. But I still have fond memories of sitting there as a teenager just flipping through those pages and staring at the weapons. Without further ado, and here you can see we get into the types of weapons, and now you can see the weapon layout. They're each divided up by the type: pole weapons, blade weapons, flex weapons, dual weapons. We have common weapons that anybody can pick up and anyone can use. They don't require any skill. But once we get into the pole weapons, blade weapons, and flex weapons, these all require special skill training. And some of them also have, as I said, strength and agility requirements. For example, the Yuan Yu Dao, which is a reclining moon blade, is a massive weapon that's extremely heavy to wield. So someone that is going to be doing damage with that is going to need to have a strength level of 3 or higher. As I mentioned before, ranged weapons are a significant part of this time period. So having all the information you need for matchlocks or bows and arrows or crossbows, as well as incendiary devices, are right at your fingertips. Ranged weapons also have combat stunts associated with them. And rounding out the book, we have our section on incendiary weapons as well as armor and shields. More appropriately, early on is when the characters come across NPCs that actually may have armor and then are trying to fight that person with hand-to-hand combat. It's in these moments where players are faced with the stark reality that some styles are going to work better than others. For example, an elephant boxer grappling someone who's wearing armor is going to be much better suited than someone who's a striker or kicker. Entire styles of martial arts were created around the fact that the enemy was wearing armor. And these are all of the things that I try to bring into the mechanics of the game without it becoming overly complex. And that concludes our tour today of the Player's Handbook. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll finish off by showing you the back cover. At the time of this recording, Fists and Fiends is currently being backed on Kickstarter. So please consider joining the 108 survivors and helping kick and punch this thing into the presses so we can get the game published and you can start your own adventures on the Silt Road.